Dear listeners, there is a man named Leroy. He lived on the street. Most people who pass him see a label, homeless, and keep walking. But one woman stopped. She bought him a $4 cup of tea. And what happened next changed both of their lives in ways neither of them expected. Because it turns out Leroy is a world class checkers champion. You're smiling, right, dear listeners? And it turns out that when Jody's father was slipping away to dementia and she was drowning in burnout, it was Leroy who threw her the lifetime. Helping is never one sided, and today's conversation is a proof of that. So, hey, dear listeners, welcome back to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, where we talk about well being not as a personal project, but as something what that happens between people. I'm your host, Avik, and I'm really, really glad that all of you are here today. And as I said, my guest today has a story and a framework that I think is going to land differently for everyone who hears it. He talks about the invisible trauma string that connects all of us and mining for gold in people instead of managing their levels, and um, about the profound two-way nature of human connection and the resilience. So why to wait? Let's get started. Please welcome our guest, Jody Zarn. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you about this stuff.
Amazing, amazing. So, only like before we get into the Leroy and the framework and everything else, I want to start with you. You mentioned childhood bullying as a part of your own story. So from there, I want to ask, like, how did that experience shape the way you eventually learned to see other people? If I have to uh, clear it, particularly people who are carrying something heavy or wearing a label the world has placed on them.
Yeah, so I have some experiences in my life that I think have really shaped who I am and how I operated, and they started from a very, very early age. So when we think of childhood bullying, we think of it as very negative, and it is. It's a very serious thing that can happen in schools. Childhood bullying can happen in communities, in the family home, and bullying itself can happen in all sorts of arenas, and it can happen anywhere. So when I was a young teenager, maybe 13 years old, I experienced some bullying from the hands of some individuals who were in my class and who were in my school, and it really, for the most part, it made me really question who I was because, as you can imagine, bullies go after your character, who you are, and I was labeled as the weird kid in school, the ugliest kid in school, and I was tormented for a good full year, and it really played havoc with my self-esteem and my self-worth, and I got to a point where I almost didn't feel like I was worthy of being alive. And this is a very common occurrence for people who are being bullied that, we do hear of teens and kids who do choose not to be alive anymore. And that's what it did to me. It made me feel like I shouldn't be here, that I was too ugly to be here. I was too weird to be here, that nobody liked me, nobody wanted me. And before I get too far into the story, I do have to say that if any of our listeners are experiencing that right now, or maybe your kids are experiencing that, I do have to tell you that there is hope and there's a good way out because you are worthy. You are supposed to be here, and you don't need to change yourself in order to be loved and accepted for who you are. So when I got to my darkest place in that time, I had this kind of strange experience. So I live in the middle of Canada and the prairies, and I went out for recess one day, and I was standing on the playground by myself, and I was just staring up at the sun. I was alone and I felt defeated. And then all of a sudden, you know how you kind of get this voice in your belly or in the back of your mind that just kind of speaks to you silently? And this voice said to me, she said, "You need to be here. And it doesn't matter if other people want you. I put you here. I want you here." And so I was stunned. I didn't know what to make of it. And so I just kept listening. And this voice said, "It doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter what other people are telling you. You have a purpose on this earth." And so that woke me up. It just woke me up so wildly, and it had this huge effect on me because then I realized it doesn't matter what other people think. I'm supposed to be here, and I learned how to love myself and how to accept myself, and that kept me alive. It kept me going. But what it also did was that it shaped the way I saw other people and the way I connected with other people, because from that point on, I think I saw other people for who they were and what they needed, and I was able to spend the rest of my life giving that same gift to other people who needed to hear the same message, that they are worthy and they're loved and they're valued, and even if you might be different, even if the people around you might not appreciate you, you still have a purpose on this earth. And so it led me down this path where I was able to connect with people from all walks of life and hopefully give them the gift that I got myself as a teen.
Correct. Exactly. And also like the invisible trauma string, right? So you use this phrase, the idea that our shared bruises connect us rather than separate us. And that's a beautiful and countercultural idea, because most of us use our wounds as walls and we protect ourselves with them. So we use them to mark that distance between us and other people. So from there, I want to ask, like, what made you see them differently, like as a thread of connection rather than a line of division?
Yeah, and you're so right when you say that we use our wounds as walls, and I think I did that for a long time. I went through, you know, periods in my life where I didn't want to get hurt, and so I did build up this wall around me because you know, to protect myself. But I met a man. He's a trauma expert here in Canada, and he taught me a lot. And I met him at the same time that I met Leroy, and he had a good line. He said that trauma is the string that binds us all together. And it really woke me up to the fact that we all have faced our fair share of adversity, and it affects us in many different ways, and we're all connected to that. And it taught me that, you know, when we interact with others who we may not understand maybe the way they're behaving in a certain way, or maybe, you know, we think, oh, this guy's being a jerk. If we can remind ourselves that that person also has experienced their share of trauma and adversity, then maybe we can have some compassion and empathy for that person rather than just going to that place of judgment. And it's interesting, when I met Leroy, what happened very quickly was that um, people really connected with his story and his journey.
Mm.
Social media is an interesting thing because we can meet people from all over the world, and but we can also share our lives with people all over. And so as soon as I met Leroy, I started sharing what I learned about him and what I learned about myself through our friendship. And I shared our kind of our path as we became friends, and I worked to support him. But what was interesting was that I very quickly began getting messages from people from all over Canada and the US telling me that they connected with his story because maybe they had a family member who had lived on the streets, or maybe they had lived on the streets, or maybe they suffered from addictions or mental health issues. And people really wanted to offer him support because they felt emotionally impacted because they could connect with him on a personal level. And that adversity that we all face, it ended up uniting us all in this quest to give Leroy
Mm.
what he needed. And it got to the point where we called ourselves Team Leroy because we were this huge community of hundreds of people all across the country who were connected by our adversity and our need to support this man. It was something to witness.
Exactly. Exactly. And for the listeners who has always experienced their own history of uh, pain as something that sets them apart, like something isolating. So, what would you want them to understand about what that uh, invisible string is actually doing?
Yeah, that I think there comes a time in many of our lives that we do feel like we are set apart, right? That maybe we're the only one who is going through something like that. And I can relate for sure, and we all feel different to some degree, but the a couple things is that what makes us different makes us special and makes us, and it's kind of a cliche, but it's really the truth. Like I think some of the greatest innovations and some of the best art and magic and all the best things in life have come from people who are embracing what how they are different. They're embracing the magic that their special skills and their talents and that kind of thing. I mean, the world needs that to be the rich and magical place that it is. And I also think that it for me, what I've learned is that it's okay to talk about your stuff. And I, up until a few weeks ago, didn't really talk very publicly about the fact that I had been bullied so badly. Um, I'm in my mid 50s and I hadn't talked to my mom about it. And people had read my book. I've written a book about it, but I hadn't really talked on video to a large degree about everything that I experienced.
Mm.
And I made a video, oh, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. And I just shared my stuff because I needed to connect with a young man in my same community who was experiencing the same stuff as me. And I thought, well, I can't live with myself if I let this kid feel like he's alone and he's the only person that's been bullied and if he feels like he's a weirdo and stuff like that. I would never live with myself if he did something, and so I shared it and I was very uncomfortable and I was very scared. We're scared to tell people that we've suffered. We're scared to tell people maybe that we have mental health issues because for years it's been such a taboo topic to talk about our stuff.
Mm.
But what happened of this video that I made was 20 minutes long, and I thought nobody's going to watch this video. It's 20 minutes long, and to date, it's had over 26,000 views, and I've had all sorts of people communicate with me that they've experienced the same thing. They've been bullied. They felt like the outsider. They felt like the weirdo. And what this whole journey is teaching me is that we need to make it okay to talk about our stuff because when we talk about our stuff, then we can show other people they're not alone and they've got a community of people who are there with them because they understand and they support them. And then it makes it easier to get through tough times and have empathy for each other and build the human connection, which is I think something that we all need.
Very well said. Very well said. Yeah. And um, so tell me about Leroy, like, because I think the story of how you came to know him and what you found when you looked past the label is the heart of everything that you are teaching. So, what happened? I mean, what did looking past the word homeless actually reveal?
Yeah, it was a fascinating thing because for years, I've really loved buying people coffee and that's kind of goes back to my need to kind of give to others and connect with others. I've really, it's super cool too. And I love giving strangers coffee. Like helping out your friends and family is one thing, which is great.
Hmm.
But seeing that look of surprise on a stranger's face when another stranger does something kind for them is just magical. It's so cool to see them light up that, somebody has paid them a kindness. And so I work downtown in the city where I live in and of being in Canada, it's like wildly cold here in the winter, like freeze to death cold. And was early November and it was kind of like the first cold day that we had. And so I got off the bus to head into my office about 7:30 in the morning and there was these two gentlemen standing on either side of the lobby, and I suspected that they were both either really, down on their luck or homeless. There was a tall young man on the left side, and he was missing the fingers on one of his hands. And then there was Leroy on the other side, and neither one of them had coats on, which here, like you just have to be dressed for the weather. So I thought, you know what? I gotta give these guys something to drink and something to eat. And I felt really compelled to do it. So I hit a coffee shop by the doors, and I brought them back a coffee and a muffin. And the first guy, the young guy, he was super happy to get his coffee, and he thanked me and went on his way. And then when I approached Leroy, he actually said he didn't like coffee, so he wouldn't take it, but he would take the muffins. So that kind of started our friendship. The next day, I noticed he was there, and I kind of had a gut feeling that he was there because he hoped that I would come back. So I introduced myself, and I said, "I know you don't like coffee, but can I get you something else?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd like a tea." And I realized, and even on the first day, I realized that Leroy couldn't see anything. He was pretty much completely blind by the time I met him. And he had been living on the streets for about 15 years and had gone blind while he was on the streets. He was in his late 60s, and we began our friendship where he would meet me at the mall every morning. There was a little kind of corner by the door that had a phone booth, like a little stand there. And so he would huddle in the corner and wait for me, and I would bring him food and supplies from home and like granola bars and sandwiches. And if he needed socks or mitts or anything like that, then and we would have a little visit, and then I'd head back up to work, and he would spend the day in the mall. The security team was really kind to him, so they would let him stay there till about 11 o'clock at night, and then he would, take a bus to, a coffee shop, and then he would stand outside in a bus shelter all night long. He kept getting assaulted. He was kind of he made for a good target because he was blind and, um,
Mm.
he was elderly, so he kept getting assaulted when he would go to shelters. So he was a very resolute and proud man. So he would just go in these little bus shacks, which were nothing more than glass walls, like it was nothing. And he would run in place and do jumping jacks all night just to keep alive.
Mm.
So every morning when I visited him, I only had like 5 or 10 minutes before I had to go back to work, and he would just give me little snippets of his life, and he did suffer from mental health issues, as we all do. We all suffer at some point.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes he was really angry, sometimes he was really stressed out and, kind of fighting his inner demons, but piece by piece, I was able to get little bits of information about who he was and what his life was and that kind of thing, and that's when I was able to get his last name, and I was able to Google him, and everything that he said was true, and he was a world-renowned checkers champion and was wildly, wildly intelligent and came from a middle class life that any one of us would aspire to. But he had mental health issues that really got away on him. And he had an eye surgery that went bad, and he had a run of really bad luck. And it really taught me that homelessness can happen to anybody. Like we're all like kind of one lost wallet or one paycheck away from being homeless ourselves. And so we built a friendship where I was able to earn his trust and advocate on his behalf to help him get long-term accommodations. So it was a wild journey.
Can totally understand. Yeah. Ah, and like a $4 cup of tea, that detail stays with me. And really, because it's so small and so specific, and yet what it communicated was enormous. And you described this as a kind of micro investment that signals to a stranger your presence in this world actually counts. So, from that perspective, like, what is it about a small or concrete act of kindness that carries that kind of weight?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, because um it's been really interesting how people have kind of reacted to our journey. And when we often think that, you know, we don't have the power to
Mm.
change the world, right? That like, what
Yeah.
can I do? Um, we've seen some we've seen our world experience a lot of challenges in the last few years, and I remember laying in bed thinking, "Well, what can I do? I'm just one person, like, I can't save the world, I can't change I'm not a superhero, right?" And, what it really taught me is that these small things can have such a huge impact, and the small kindnesses mean more than we'll ever know, and the small unkindnesses have a bigger impact than what we'll ever know too. And what's interesting is exactly a year before I met Leroy, I had some skin cancer on my head. And it wasn't a huge surgery, like it wasn't life threatening, but I hate getting attention for that kind of stuff. Like I hate like the hashtag hugs and prayers and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But people knew that I really liked buying coffee. So I thought, well, I'll deflect because I don't want people like feeling sorry for me. So I'll get them thinking about coffee instead. So when I announced that to my world on social media that I had to have this surgery on my head, I said, "Let's call it Coffee for Zarno Day," because my nickname is Zarno. And I said, "On surgery day, when I'm getting this big patch of stuff taken out of my head, go out and do me a favor and buy a stranger a cup of coffee and post it on social media so I can see it and do the hashtag Coffee for Zarno." And hoping that people would think about that rather than feeling sorry for me. And I didn't actually expect anybody to do it. Like, I thought, my mom would do it to be a good sport, and my husband might do it.
Hmm.
But so I went out for surgery and I got this rectangle taken out of my head and I came back and I had a sleep. And when I woke up, I was just mind blown because it wasn't just a couple people that did it. In the course of 24 hours, we had over 800 people all over Canada and then the US and some in the UK go out and buy strangers coffee. We had schools have bake sales and they donated the proceeds to cancer agencies. We had restaurants give out free coffee for the day. Coffee groups did stuff. And it just went bananas. Even the mayor of our city went out and bought people coffee, and the cool part is that, a couple things, is that through the day, I would get messages from people saying, I woke up feeling really depressed today. And I went out and I bought a stranger a coffee and I told them why. And it just made them so happy that they were just so thrilled that I did this. And time and time again, I got messages all over saying it really helped me and it felt so good to do something. And even now, I will get messages saying, I pulled a Zarno. I bought a homeless guy lunch, or I saw this family having a tough time, so I did something kind for them. And, I think for that day, it was a lot it was a the world was a kinder place because they say that if you buy a stranger a cup of coffee, it makes 3 people happy. It makes the person happy because they got free coffee and maybe they're going through a tough time, right? We don't know.
Yes.
But it makes you happy because you get that there's kind of like that spark of positive energy and human connection that comes from it, especially knowing that you've helped somebody. But that person who gets the free coffee, they'll also go tell people, "Hey, I got a free coffee today," and it just really made my day. I was, feeling kind of blue because whatever. And those little sparks of goodness that come from just doing something small, I think that creates a real positive energy and it
Yeah.
helps people because then, like you say, like the invisible string of adversity and that kind of thing, maybe the person that's on the receiving end, maybe they have their own cancer diagnosis, or maybe they just lost their job, or, maybe their kids having a tough time in school. Well, if somebody out of the blue pays them that kindness, that could be the one thing that gets them through the day and gets them through their own adversity. So I think we have a lot of power ourselves to really make a big difference. And for Leroy, having me talk to him every day, it reminded him that he had a place on this earth still, that he still needed to be here because he had value to offer.
Exactly. Exactly. And and also want to ask, like, uh, but I mean, this is for the person who is listening. who has been walking past their own version of Leroy, um, who has been too busy or too depleted or too protected behind their own labels and assumptions to stop. So, who has a $4 cup of tea to give but hasn't given it. So, what do you want to tell them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I've had a lot of people come up to me and say,
Mhm.
like hearing about Leroy's journey, it's made them look at homeless people differently because we have those assumptions. We have assumptions about our homeless community that aren't necessarily accurate. We also have fears, I think. Like I think a lot of people think I'm afraid to do something because I don't know how it's gonna go. And uh, first of all, like, always be aware of your safety, like, of course, that's always important, but it's going to make you so happy. Um, when I'm able to connect with somebody who's on the streets, there's a man named Jamie actually that I meet now, regularly when I get off the bus, and I've heard his story. He got hurt at work. His disability payments aren't enough for him to afford his apartment, and it makes me feel so good to connect with him because it shows me that every person living on the streets has a story. They have a family, they have, they have skills and they have something to offer. And you are always, always, always going to walk away feeling like you're the winner, that you've been able to connect with somebody in such a positive way. And sometimes people think, "Well, I don't know what to do because I don't have any money on me and I don't have anything to give," or maybe you don't want to or whatever, but, if you are approached, even just saying making eye contact with that person and saying, "Hey, I don't have anything, but good luck." Like, "I want you to have a good day." Like, that goes a very long way because, again, then our friends who do live on the streets, they know that they're still there. They're not invisible. And after I started helping Leroy, he said to me one day, he said, "People are watching you." And I
Mm.
said, "Well, like, what do you mean they're watching me?" And he said, "They're mimicking you because you have started helping me. Now other people are coming and bringing me food and helping me too." So it's this ripple effect. So even just a smile, like "Hey, how's it going?" Like, "Good luck, have a good day." You are always, always going to walk away the winner because you're going to feel good and your life's going to be better by doing it.
Mm, very true. And if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium to connect?
Well, yeah, there's a couple ways. So I've written a book about my journey with Leroy, and it was really important to Leroy to have his story told. He really wanted to offer value to the world, and he wanted people to know his story, to know that, to see people beyond their label. So the book is called Higher Power Betty and the Homeless Man Who Changed My Life. And it's available on Amazon worldwide. So if you can find Amazon. And I also have a website. It's jodyzarn.com. So jodyzarn.com. And yeah, Jody Zarn on Instagram if you want to follow me on Instagram. So yeah, we would like to share this story with the world because I think it's something that a lot of people can connect with. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links and the details into the show notes for your easy reference so that you can easily reach out to her. And with this, that's a wrap for today's episode on Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. And if something Jody said made you think of someone that you have been walking past, metaphorically or literally, please don't let that pass. The invisible trauma string connects you, and the $4 investment might be the most important one that you make this week. So, as I promised, Jody's details will be there in the show notes. And if this conversation belongs in someone else's world today, then please share it with them. With this, I'm your host, Avik, and this is Healthy Man, Healthy Life. We are all more connected by our bruises than we are separated by them. So take care of yourselves and each other, and see you next time. Thank you so much.